This is the emergency detention training for law enforcement and local judiciary, a collaboration between the LMHAs and the PDs. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Diana Cantu. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Texoma Community Center. During her tenure as CEO, Texoma Community Center has achieved certification as a certified community behavioral health clinic. Dr. Cantu has worked to enhance law enforcement collaborations and training opportunities for officers to address behavioral health gaps in the local community. Prior to working at Texoma Community Center, Dr. Cantu worked for Old Dominion University as the clinical faculty and for DuPont as an instructional designer, creating learning interventions and training programs for various companies around the world. Chief Zachary Flores started his law enforcement career with the Sherman Police Department in 2007 and was promoted to Chief of Police in 2016. Chief Flores sits on several boards, including the Grayson County Crisis Center Board of Directors, the Carruth Police Institute Advisory Board, the Texoma Regional Police Academy Advisory Board, the Grayson College Foundation Board of Directors, and he is the past chair for the Texas Behavioral Health Leadership Team. Loren Hervey currently serves as the Senior Director for Children's and Crisis Services at Texoma Community Center. She's a licensed professional counselor in Texas since 2012 and a licensed supervisor since 2014. Ms. Hervey has 15 years of experience working in crisis mental health services. Prior to her services at TCC, she served as the clinical director for Adapt Community Solutions, where she interfaced with various community partners to ensure individuals in crisis receive the proper level of care to meet their mental health needs. This time, I'll turn it over to the panel.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm going to skip this since you kind of already introduced us. My name is Dr. Diana Cantu, Chief Flores, and Loren Hervey. And we're going to be talking to you a little bit about just a quick overview of what a community center is. Some of you may not be fully familiar with what a community center is. Some of you may be more intimately familiar. We're also going to talk a little bit more about TCC. Chief Flores is going to give you a quick overview of his police department and his staff. We're going to also talk to you about how this training came about. And we're also going to share the different parts of the training, like different topics that we cover in this training. We're going to share cost. I know everybody's always interested in how much is it? Can we afford it? Can we afford to do it? And we're also going to talk about the importance of relationship building. I think that's been a common theme today, the importance of collaboration and relationships. And I think that this training in particular is really the culmination of that. And so we'll share a little bit more about how it came to be. And what that relationship has meant to us and what we've been able to do to impact our community. So a community center, really every area of Texas has one. 254 counties, you are represented by a local mental health authority. It started back in 1965. And in your bench books, if you go to Health and Safety Code 534, it talks a lot about the community services and community centers. We follow Texas Administrative Code. LMHAs work with Health and Human Services on different types of contracts and have to deliver different requirements. And we're also locally sponsored, which again means that your local communities, whether it's a city or a county, is invested in the local mental health authority. TCC is one of the 39 community centers, and we are right there, right at the very top. We border Oklahoma. We sit right along the Red River, and we serve three different counties: Cook, Fannin, and Grayson. Grayson County is our largest county with 136,000 people. Cook and Fannin have about 36,000, and we are extremely rural. So Sherman is one of our largest cities in Grayson County. We also are the LIDA, right, the Local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authority. And we are also a certified community behavioral health clinic. What that means is that there's improved access to entry into services, and we have very stringent criteria that we have to follow. There are federal models for CCBHCs. Texas was not necessarily chosen as a demonstration state initially. However, HHS has been working with LMHAs to move towards the CCBHC model, and we got approved last year as a CCBHC.
All right, so Chief Flores, appreciate being here and the opportunity to speak. My department, we've got 71 officers on staff. serve a population of about 42,000, and we are the largest city in that Tri-County area that TCC serves. All of our officers go through a certain amount of training. We get them into CIT training, de-escalation. Several of them are mental health peace officers or have been through mental health first aid. And as you can see, 68 of the staff of the 71 have completed the crisis training that we're talking about here today. The only ones that haven't are new officers that have started since then. And to speak to a little bit of what Austin spoke about, they said that they added to their computer-aided dispatching the availability to track mental health calls and say that this call had a mental health component to it. So our computer-aided dispatch system won't do that. And the vendor says, we're not going to do that. And we're a small fish. And they're not worried about our 70 officers and making changes to their platform so that they can serve us, so that we can have better data, and so that we can better serve our community. That's just a reality. And so we needed a workaround. So to track our calls so that we could tell what is our local mental health authority actually dealing with? What are we actually dealing with? Because we really didn't know. We had to create something that was searchable within our call notes for our officers or dispatchers to be able to enter in. And so we had to find something that was not necessarily a derivative of a license plate, because it kept pulling those up. And we landed on that, I'll call it a hashtag now, number sign, MHC 999. And if it could be a disturbance, it could be a robbery, it could be anything. And if there's a mental health component to it, our officers are going to put that in there so that we'll know we responded to that, and that may need to be evaluated or passed over to the LMHA to be reviewed. So we just started that this past February. And that's how we're able to track that a better, more accurate number of the calls that we're taking. So that's a quick overview of us there at Sherman PD.
So why did we develop this kind of training? Why did Chief Flores and his team develop the mental health call hashtag? Part of it was because we recognized that there was a huge disconnect between the LMHA and between PD. And after a stakeholder meeting, Chief Flores and I stayed afterwards and we talked. And I think there were frustrations on both sides. And I think there was a misunderstanding on both sides as to exactly what his officers were dealing with, what my team was dealing with. And we both agreed, we said, you know what, we got to make this better. And we're going to commit to working together to make this better. And so that began last year in March. It was right pre-COVID. We had just had Chief Flores over right when everything started shutting down. And so we met, and this is what we came up with. He came over with some of his officers, and we had some of our team together, and we talked about what do we want to do? How do we want to improve this relationship, and what can we do? I think it's important that I share that, again, we are a rural center. We're a rural-based center. We're one of the lowest funded centers in Texas. Not the lowest, but one of the lowest funded. We're small. I have about 200 staff. My MCOT team is 5 people and 1 LPHA, so that's not a lot to cover 3 very large counties. And he doesn't have as many officers as well. And so Sherman is about, how many people did you say?
About 42,000, and yet we've got 70 officers. And so we can't afford to have a full-time CIT team or send people out directly for that. And we recognize that there's a lot of good models and different things out there. There's great things. We knew that. However, I had been to a lot of conferences, and one of my frustrations with Diana was a separation from reality. So I'd been to a lot of conferences and seen a lot of things and a lot of different models that seemed awesome. And I'd come talk to Diana about it, like, why couldn't we do this? This is pretty simple. She said, oh, we could. I said, that's great. Okay, let's do that. We don't have the money. I was, okay, well, that's fine. I'm not going to complain about that. Let's move forward and do something. And so this is where we got to. We were going to move forward and we were going to do something. And we were going to improve that because that's our responsibility. And that's why we decided to partner together.
So ultimately, we wanted to improve the number of street-level diversions. We wanted them to be able to make appropriate referrals to the LMHA, determine if really that was medical treatment or crisis assessments that were needed. We also wanted to build confidence in law enforcement. We wanted them to be able to recognize a situation, be able to address it, decide, do they need to go to the hospital? Do they need to call us? Is it a situation that they can walk away from and just refer? We also wanted improved information on EDOs. It was really difficult for our staff to be able to make calls on EDOs when they weren't getting all the information. And ultimately, what we decided was if there is an improved relationship between the local mental health authority and law enforcement, the community wins. And so we are very early in that intercept model, right? We're very early. If you look at Intercept 0, that's really where the LMHA begins their services. And then right about Intercept 1, right in the middle, is where Chief Flores and his team kind of comes in. And so we wanted to build a bridge between both of those to be able to divert people from jail. You've heard today also that, the jail is becoming a mental health harboring or like a housing facility. Well, if we can divert them street level and we can either send them to an appropriate placement, we can get them into treatment, or we can, inform our judicial system along the line a little bit better, then we will have better outcomes because we have better information. So what we decided is we said, okay, we need to bring in the people that are doing the job and really talk to them and find out what they're facing and what are the issues and where are the gaps. So we used a lot of anecdotal evidence, and we talked to our MCOT team, we talked to our LPHAs, and we said, what are you seeing? We also looked at our EHR and we pulled some data to determine, when there was a crisis assessment, what are we seeing? We sat down with Chief Flores and his field training officers and also with Grayson County Sheriff's Department officers and talked to them and what they were seeing. We also looked at body cam footage, which if you've never sat through one of the body cam footages of an officer addressing a mental health issue, it is enlightening for you to see what our officers face every day, especially in a mental health crisis. And so that really helped to drive the training. So this was sort of a design-based approach in what we said, we're going to take all this information, identify what the gaps are, and we're going to put this training together. While we were doing this as well, what we decided to do is meet with Chief Flores and his team, and we actually have a monthly call with him, and we kind of call it our frequent offenders, and we staff frequent offenders with him weekly, people that he's constantly seeing, hey, we're seeing this individual again, which makes us more aware. We can talk to the case manager and do more interventions. So it opened up a dialogue, and it's funny because earlier today at 2 o'clock, my alarm went off, and it was our SPD TCC call. So it's appropriate that we're presenting, yeah. So
Well, we already did that informally.
yeah, we did that this morning. As a matter of fact, we just staffed something.
I would speak also to the fact that I try to make data-driven decisions. And one of the things that I was concerned with was that I get a lot of feedback from officers saying, hey, we took this person for an emergency detention and nothing. We took this person for emergency detention and they go. And so I started thinking, I need to look at the number of emergency detentions that we're doing versus the number that are accepted or housed. How many are released? Because if we are making substantially more emergency detention detainments or arrests than TCC is accepting, we're not doing something right. And I can't, one of the things that I stress our officers is we need to do our job and let them do their job. And we were way too concerned about doing their job. And what it took was looking at that information to say, yeah, we're off base. We're not looking, and I'll speak to it later as to where we got off base, and we found that. But through those meetings and actually trying to dig down to it is where we were able to determine that.
So a little bit about the training.
So I guess this would probably help. So what we did as a result of kind of getting together, brainstorming the challenges, figuring out where the disconnect was, is began drafting and formulating a crisis training that TCC has been performing with the officers. So right now it's an 8-hour class that one of our licensed professional counselors teaches with one of our qualified mental health professionals. So far, we have completed the training with the Sherman Police Department and plan to do routine revisits of that training as new officers come on board. And then we've also started to work with the Grayson County Sheriff's Department, and other cities and counties in our area have begun to take note of the training and kind of go, hey, how can we get some of that as well? So that's been really cool to see that community response. As far as the goals that we were hoping to achieve with the training is we wanted to prepare our officers to be able to respond and identify a mental health crisis in the field. Some of the feedback that I've heard from law enforcement over my years in crisis has been like, we didn't go into law enforcement to do mental health, right? But here they are faced with all these challenges and scenarios that are complex and challenging and are difficult to make decisions. So we wanted to empower and enable them to feel confident making a decision in the field. Does this warrant a mental health crisis, or does this warrant, an individual who's broken the law? Or does this warrant a situation in which we would just make a referral and leave? And so the other thing we wanted to teach them was to understand how in the field to de-escalate verbally a scenario and, essentially reduce the likelihood of use of force, et cetera. And like Chief Flores said, we wanted to help the officers write an EDO in a way that provided our mental health clinicians with enough information that we could make a good decision. Because you'll hear law enforcement go, I just wrote an EDO on this guy, and now he's back on the street 48 hours later. What happened? And we were looking at the EDO and saying, well, there were 2 sentences here. So it was very difficult to determine really what the level of need was. And so we wanted to help them speak each other's language so that we could both make the right decisions. And then most importantly, we wanted them to understand how to access the resources of the local mental health authority. Law enforcement gets a lot of resources thrown at them, and I think most of our officers really do want to help. And they want to provide people with a referral that would be helpful for them, but they don't even know where to turn or where to send them. And so by teaching our officers how to access the local mental health authority, we're simplifying it for them. Just send the individual to us, and we'll point them in the right direction and get them services. So that was one of our goals. So some of the topics that we cover in the training directly is helping the officers understand what warrants a mental health crisis. So if an individual represents an imminent harm to self or others because they're experiencing suicidal thoughts, behaviors, homicidal thoughts, behaviors, actions, psychosis, or decompensation. And we wanted to talk with them about what does a mobile crisis team do? What can you expect from us? I think that as we, in our community, we're all dealing with challenges and barriers, but I think if we all understand each other's role, things can get, we can be more collaborative. And then, what can we share when you're in a crisis? What information can be shared? So those are some really important things we wanted to make sure that they understood, and what our responsibilities were as the LMHA. And so they, Integral Care talked about this a lot. Really, I love the right care, right place, right time. So really, we want to do the assessment, we want to evaluate risk, and we want to make a determination about an individual's safety in the community, and propose the least restrictive treatment alternative. And then we reviewed order types. So these are just some of our training topics. Like I said, I think the most important thing in here is really just the making sure that the officers understood how to access our services, and we even walked them through a little bit of the liability and addressed some of their concerns about writing orders. So those are some of the things that we cover.
I think it's important to note here is that we did not dictate all of these topics. We talked about what we felt was important for law enforcement to know, and also his officers dictated what they wanted more information on. So this was a collaborative training that we were able to put together. And I think sometimes when you're developing training, we tend to look at training through the one lens that we want people to see, but when you really come together and you recognize where you think there's a gap, there really isn't. The gap is really on the other side of things. And so really involving them in this conversation about what do you need, where are your frustration points, what information do you still you're still not clear on, or if you're clear on this, can you help us understand this better? It really was a collaboration of topics, and this is what you're seeing. So these are all the topics, like Loren said, there's 8 hours of training, and we put this together. So that's very important, that if this is something that your community wants to do, that you work with your local law enforcement to identify really where are those gaps.
And so some of the things that we wanted to, understand if prior to the training and post training, how did we do? So some of the survey questions that we asked officers were whether or not they felt like they felt confident about the training objectives. So recognizing the behavioral health crisis, feeling confident writing an EDO, whether or not they felt like they understood how to access TCC services. And so on our survey results, it was pretty interesting. Some of the written feedback is like, well, I thought I knew how to write an EDO, but after this training, I actually was doing it wrong. So, but some of the biggest changes that we saw was that we increased officer confidence in making referrals, knowing how to refer someone, knowing the services provided by the local mental health authority and how we could collaborate those services to get people better outcomes. And so we really felt like this was a big win as, towards our goal of collaboration and working together.
No. It went away.
There we go.
So, so like I said, and our team as well, I think we're feeling increasingly comfortable across departments. So our mobile crisis team feels more comfortable working with law enforcement, and we're feeling more comfortable having more information on EDOs. We're communicating, we're staffing situations. We were able, like he said, to huddle today and talk about a youth in crisis in our community and figure out a plan. And I think that over time has built a lot of trust between both departments, and ultimately led to better outcomes for our consumers, our citizens, which is ultimately the goal. Another thing that came out of our training is making it easy on officers. They've got so much to do, so much paperwork, and so many, they're placing their lives in danger often on the day-to-day. So we really wanted to make it easy for them to access our services. And so we created on our online platform at TCC an ability for them to make a very quick and easy referral. So if they responded to a call and the individual did not warrant an involuntary hospitalization, or there was no crime committed, but they did recognize this person seems to be suffering from a mental illness and may need some additional support, they can, right from their phones, hit our website and make a referral, giving us the name of the individual. So this is an example of one of the referrals we did receive from our law enforcement officers in Sherman, where they just, sending us a little alert. Hey, can you check on this person? They seem to be struggling. And so that's an easy way for us to be able to receive those and respond, and making it simpler on our law enforcement to make those.
So I want to make one comment about that real quick and why there is significance to that.
The wrong way. I'm sorry.
All over the state of Texas, there are thousands of police officers determining whether or not they're going to get somebody in connection with their local mental health authority. And I will promise you, I was having a conversation. I'm working on a program in Denton right now. I was speaking with a law enforcement officer in Denton County, and I said, he was asking me where I was going. I said, well, I'm doing this presentation with our LMHA. He said, what's that? Mm-hmm. Honestly. And my officers, prior to this training, if you would have asked them, how are you going to get somebody to the LMHA, or they would know it as TCC, for some help, they'd say, oh, I'd arrest them for emergency detention. Whether they needed it or not. Okay? This is significant. So simple. But the importance of it coming before you today is that I promise you that Sherman's no different than the rest of the state. And so I don't mind showing some of our failures in the past, or some of our own shortcomings. I'll come forward and tell you that because it will help this state. And so that is the importance of that to me. So, yeah, that leads right on into some of the results for us. It empowered officers to make street-level decisions. So one of the things that was very important is, as the administrator of the police department, I had to tell the officers, when you go out and you make one of these decisions to arrest somebody or not, I stand behind you. You're going to go to somebody that's in front of a business, and that business wants them gone, and they haven't done anything wrong, nor are they a danger to somebody. They don't have to be arrested. And so we do things because we have to, not because we can. And I think each of you know that law enforcement is given so much authority. And there is a lot of things that a police officer can do. Do they have to do it? And so I needed my officers to know that when they do not arrest somebody and that business owner is upset, they can throw rocks at me. That is okay. They needed that confidence. This training helped them understand better when they are going to be justified in that. We started tracking the calls. We developed a supplemental piece of paperwork, literally just another sheet, because they were right. These officers just take what's in front of them. We are animals, okay? So you give us a sheet of paper and it says, fill this out, we're filling that out. And it has 2 lines, we're filling out 2 lines. Look, I guess it's to your left there, that was all the space they had to put in all the administrative things plus their cause. When I think you all know the cause was so much greater than that. And what we ended up doing with Diana and her team was showing them the video. Because the officers would come to me and say, all this happened, and I'd call Diana and she's like, oh no, they didn't say any of that. I was like, well, yeah, they filled out the paperwork. Well, yeah, but it doesn't say any of that.
2 lines.
Yeah, it's all squished together and the handwriting's really bad. And it all looks like one word in a run-on sentence. So we just made another piece of paper. It was that simple. And we're the biggest city in our area. So I can promise you every other city's doing that. So we give this to the hospitals and we fixed it for everybody. Pretty simple, but it is so important. These are very base level, talking about low fruit, that we just didn't know. So again, the officers making those street level decisions. I've heard it today several times talking about an MCOT's duty to provide a least restrictive environment. Our officers needed to hear that because nowhere in the police academy do they teach you least restrictive. They teach you jail, not least restrictive. So our officers go somewhere and they call the MCOT. Their expectation is not least restrictive. Their expectation is fix the problem now. They got to change that. We have to change that mind frame. And so we needed to get out of that. We needed to better define for them what a crisis was, because I can tell you this, their crisis at the time was whatever this call came in. Crisis, I've got to deal with it so that administration, so that the different internal and external political environments don't eat me alive as a police officer. That was the motivating factor. So they needed to know that, look, there's confidence so long as you're making a determination based on what a crisis actually is. Do these people have to be arrested for an emergency detention, or do they just need the help of the local mental health authority? That's the decision that you're making. They needed to know that. And so we as a county, I'll tell you this, Diana and I together have worked. We have held ourselves at time on we are doing jail diversion base level at Intercept 3, but we don't know it. So I'm telling Diana, look, I can't do that. As the chief administrator, I can't do that. We've got to do something different. So let's get together and let's attack this at the base level, and that's where we got, because we heard it before, there are implications when you arrest somebody that doesn't need to be arrested. Their kids don't go to school the next day. Their parents don't show up to their jobs. There are things that happen because the officers can be afraid of these different internal and external environments. So we have to, I see a lot of law enforcement in here. As law enforcement, we have to change the mindset, and administrators, we have to give them confidence to do what needs to be done for these people. And it has to be clear.
We've also heard today that, in our judiciary arm, what happens when we see people coming through our system, right? Why couldn't we have stopped them at a community level? Why couldn't we have stopped them at Intercept 0, Intercept 1? Well, this was one of the ways that we could divert individuals, right? What happens when you don't get that correct information on an EDO so that you can make the proper decision? And so that was very eye-opening to us. And I think that was very eye-opening to Chief Flores when he saw it. He said, oh my gosh, we're not giving you the information you need. And then we started, we were going from pointing fingers at one another to going, oh my God, it's both of us, right? We're both not providing each other with the information that we need. So it's important for us to consider very early on in these intercepts the difference that we can make with information sharing. So I'm sure you're all wondering how much money this took And like I said, as a small rural LMHA, we literally spent $250 on materials. You guys have sticker shock? $250 on a binder and paper and time. It does cost staff time. So one of our crisis directors has gone out and she's been able to provide the training to Chief Flores' officers, and he also agreed to provide officer time for this. And so we agreed that ultimately this was the investment that we wanted to make in our community. So again, Loren, you want to hold up our binder? Our binder? Like literally that's our training. And the wonderful thing about the training is the body cam footage that Chief Flores provided, we pulled actual examples from some of that body cam footage, and we used those as a situational awareness and as an exercise for his officers to go through. So we do a retrospective analysis on a situation and we say, okay, what could we have done better? What information can you provide to improve the outcome next time? And we have had some officers that have been a little resistant. They're like, oh, that was me. And then you just kind of see them hide. But I think it's important that we conduct that retrospective analysis and that we review things and that we peel that onion back. We're going to cry as we get to the middle, but it's important for us to do that so that we can continue to learn.
So one real quick anecdote to that. Love our high school in Sherman. It's great. But those high school football coaches spend hours poring over film for a game that ultimately means nothing. And we have so much officer footage that we tuck away and say, man, hope nobody sees that. We can't do that. We have to be better than that. And we had this tool, like they're saying, that costs nothing. We've got our own examples. We don't have to go look at other places. We've got our own. And that tool is so powerful. And we've got it. Every agency does. But you have to make a decision that we're going to take a look at it.
So if you look at the benefits, these are just a few of the big benefits that we saw. We saw an increase in online referrals from our officers in the community. They felt better about situations. I think officers will call me, they'll call our crisis team. Chief Flores is like on my speed dial, or he'll text me, hey, I have a situation. We have our staff meeting that we meet with them every month. There's a better relationship, there's better collaboration. There's more trust, and I think that's an important word, and that's a word that I really would like to have you focus on, trust. There is trust that he's going to give us the information that we need, and there's trust that we're going to deliver on something that he needs us to deliver on, and that we're also going to partner with the rest of the intercept to be able to provide those services, and that's important. We've also seen improved diversions. We've been able to increase positive outcomes for our community, and we really feel like our judicial system is so much better informed. We're very lucky in Grayson County that we have a system that we have now been able to establish that is very communicative. We work together to improve the outcomes for our community, and that's very important, but that required trust. That required trust of all of the stakeholders to be able to get to that point.
So I think one thing about the sequential intercept model, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is that I think people struggle sometimes with referrals, or where do I refer somebody for this? Where do I refer somebody for this? But as a local mental health authority, we have programs at every step of the intercept model. And so we're kind of touching everything. So if you have a failed communication breakdown in your county with your local mental health authority, then none of these services are going to work appropriately. I've been, prior to coming to TCC and kind of working in a more rural area, I came from the Dallas area and worked in kind of the more urban setting for 10 years. And it really, I think, obviously funding is different, and there's a lot more funding in urban areas, but communication seems to be a struggle no matter where you are. And I think that's absolutely something that we can control as professionals, and we can improve upon. And so I think we were talking about or looking at this model and going, oh, we have a service for that. Oh, we have a service for that at that level. And so I think if you're not communicating proactively with your local mental health authority, then services aren't being delivered to clients in a way that they should be. And so I think the thing that came out of this training the most for us is just that enhanced collaboration and communication.
So they left this for me because I truly believe in this. I'll spare you the expense of me reading it, but I couldn't think of a more true statement that collaboration, that's the key. the intercept model's built. We're not tasked with reinventing this thing. We need to talk about this thing and give credit where credit's due and accept where we fail sometimes. I don't think any of us are looking for the perfect system, because we're dealing with people, and that's okay. We accept it. But the collaboration is what improved us. And in the spirit of that, I want to say thank you to Judge Rita. She's over here. She's one of our magistrates. She's been a part of this. When TCC and the county were having a situation, and they came to me and said, "Hey, can you help kind of mitigate this deal?" And one of the first people I called was her. And we do collaborate very well, and I'm proud of the area that we're in and the things that we've been able to achieve.
Questions? No? We're good. Thank
We
you.
have a couple minutes for questions, if
Oh,
anybody has some. But we're going to limit those to one or two. Judge Kazin.
Yeah, I don't need a microphone, I'm loud enough. So when we do the judges boards we were talking about earlier, a lot of them I can't do either. They don't make criteria. So we developed a way where we then call MCOT, so that at the end of the day, I'm not just denying it. MCOT can go out and check on it. It's a safety net for the judge saying no. But if I'll tell me now that I hear you, could we expand that so that all judges can call MCOT when they have some individual that they believe may be in crisis, they're in their court without necessarily triggering competency restoration and all the other stuff? Is it possible to think that when they grow, that MCOT can respond to a judge's inquiry or a lawyer?
I think that's going to depend on each LMHA and the size of their team. As I mentioned, we're 5 on-call workers for 3 very large counties, and we've got 1 LPHA that works during the day, and we have to rotate our LPHAs at night. I think that's a wonderful idea, and our judges actually reach directly out to us and talk to us through email. But we've worked on building that relationship and that trust with them, so I think that's something that you're going to have to develop in your county. And that's something that you're going to have to partner with the LMHA to be able to do that. It makes it difficult to give out the numbers. I've had actually a JP in another county say, "I want the on-call workers number." We can't do that because that's also detracting them from other calls. But we do provide avenues and options for communication so that they can say, "I have the situation, I need help now." And we do respond fairly quickly to those.
One idea I have for you, as well as some other counties have done, when I worked in an urban setting, we built a relationship with the JPs in some of our outlying or our rural counties, in which essentially they said, kind of agreed amongst themselves, we're only going to receive referrals for EDOs if it is prompted by MCOT, and if a family wants to come in and appeal for an emergency detainment, then we need MCOT to do an assessment prior to me signing. So really the judge is signing based on the MCOT recommendation, as opposed to doing an approval or denial and then sending MCOT upon a denial. So that's one idea, is to put it at the front of your decision. Yeah.
Dr. Cantu, Chief Flores, Ms. Hervey, thank you very much.
Thank
Will you all
you.
be around in the foyer for questions?
Absolutely.